Oh boy, we've got the Garmin Enduro 1 and the Garmin Enduro 2. Which one's right for you? Which one are you gonna get? You're gonna want to stick around for this video. Hey there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave from Chase to Summit, and in this video today, we're gonna talk about a couple of different watches. We've got the brand new Garmin Enduro 2, which came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago. An amazing, fully capable watch that's basically a Garmin Fenix 7 at a slightly higher price point with more battery life. And if you want to learn all about the Enduro 2, I'll link my full review up here, but this isn't the video for that. In this video, I want to compare the new Garmin Enduro 2 to the older Garmin Enduro 1 and kind of take a deep dive on 12 different aspects of these watches that I think are worth talking about. And then at the end of the video, we'll discuss which one's right for you. The Garmin Enduro 2 and the Enduro 1 are incredible watches for endurance athletes like ultra runners or triathletes or Ironman athletes. Anybody like that should be interested in these watches because they have incredible battery life and a ton of features, but they are pretty different, and that's what I want to talk about today. Before we dive all the way into this video though, I do want to let you know about today's sponsor though, and that is playbetter.com. Playbetter.com sells the Garmin Enduro 1 and the Enduro 2, and they also offer a bunch of different sport watches from Coros and Suunto and Polar, just about everybody out there, at competitive pricing with free 2-day shipping and a no-hassle 2-month-long return policy. So if you change your mind down the road, you can always send it back. Pretty awesome. Not only that, but PlayBetter has provided me with a unique discount code for viewers of my channel that'll get you an extra $50 off the original Garmin Enduro 1, which is really impressive and a big reason why I'm actually making this video, because the pricing on this thing is kind of bananas right now. And if you're interested in picking up any of the watches I show off in this video, check out the links in the description down below because they do help support my channel and they cost nothing extra to you. And with all that out of the way, let's dive right into the 12 key differences between the Enduro 1 and Enduro 2. In this first one, I'm just gonna dive right in head first, is gonna be pricing. The Garmin Enduro 2 is an incredible watch and you'll learn that throughout this video, but it's very expensive. The Garmin Enduro 2 right now retails for $1,100 here in the USA. There's only one model you can choose from, so the price kind of is what it is. $1,100 US is a ton of money for a GPS watch that you wear on your wrist, and it's hard to justify for a lot of people out there. Now, jumping over to the Garmin Enduro 1, these are both Enduro 1s by the way, it's pretty different because if you opt for the titanium model, which is on the left here, this comes in at about $750 US right now, depending where you shop. But this is very important. If you go with the steel model, which is the silver one on the right here, this is made out of stainless steel. This one comes in at $550 here in the USA. And not only that, like I said during the sponsor read of this video, you can get an extra $50 off by using discount code ENDURO50CTS at checkout at playbetter.com. And that brings the price of the steel version of the Enduro 1 down to $499, which is just kind of crazy considering this thing was $800 just about a year ago. So that makes this selection pretty hard because over on the left here, you've got the $1,100 Enduro 2, then you've got the $750 titanium Enduro 1, and then the steel Enduro 1 coming in at just $500. Which one do you choose? Well, that's why we're going to talk about the other 11 things in this video. Before we dive into number 2, I do want to remind you that if you find this video helpful or fun or anything, to give me a thumbs up and subscribe down below because that really helps me out and it helps this channel grow. Okay, let's move on. Moving into number 2 on this list is going to be size and weight, and it's kind of a minor difference, but it might matter to you. So all of these watches are a 51 millimeter in diameter. That's going to be the Enduro 2 on the left and the Enduro 1s on the right here. Where they differ though is going to be the thickness, which is really hard to see, but if you look closely, the Enduro 2 is slightly thicker. It's got this little bump out on the back of the watch, on the back cover, and that is to house a little bit more battery life in the Enduro 2. The Enduro 2 comes in at 15.6 millimeters thick, while the Enduro 1 comes in at 14.9 millimeters thick, so it's not even a full millimeter difference, but it is there. And when it comes to the weight of these watches, it is super confusing, so bear with me here. The Garmin Enduro 2 comes in at 71 grams. This is the only model of it, and it's made out of titanium, which does lead to a slightly lighter weight. However, if you jump over to the titanium version of the Enduro 1, it actually comes in 10 grams lighter at about 60 grams. That is pretty significant when we're talking about a watch that's worn on your wrist and you do feel it. However, if you go over to the steel version of the Enduro 1, it comes in at 70 grams, which is only 1 gram lighter than the Enduro 2. And that's pretty interesting. So the Enduro 2 is basically the same weight as the steel Enduro 1, and they're almost exactly the same size. Will you notice this size and weight difference on your wrist? Maybe if you're sensitive to it. Most people probably not. I thought it was just worth mentioning. The next big one I'm gonna get out of the way up front is going to be battery life. The Garmin Enduro 2 has incredibly long GPS on battery life. When you're out on an activity, when you're running or riding a bike or anything like that, the Garmin Enduro 2 can track up to 150 hours in a GPS activity using the GPS only mode. I say up to there because this is a solar powered watch, so in order to get that 150 hours of maximum GPS battery life, you do need to have some sunlight on the display of the watch to charge it up a little bit. On the Garmin Enduro 1, it's a little bit different. You can get up to 80 hours in a GPS activity, which is still a ton of time. That 80 hours does take into account some solar if you get sun on the display. Without solar, you're looking at more like 70 hours. Now, personally, for me, I've never done an activity longer than 70 hours long, so this should be suitable for most people. But if you're somebody on a thru hike on the Appalachian Trail or something, and you need a crazy long battery life, in GPS mode, the Garmin Enduro 2 might be the way to go. However, there is a sneaky thing about the Enduro 1. It does outperform the Enduro 2 when it comes to standby time or smartwatch mode, when you're just living your life wearing the watch on your wrist, not tracking an activity. The Garmin Enduro 1 can last up to 50 days just using it as a smartwatch, which is really awesome. That means you can go nearly 2 months without plugging your watch in to charge it. On the other hand, the Garmin Enduro 2 lasts up to about 34 days, so you get about a month of use as a smartwatch on the Enduro 2. And I think that's a really interesting spec to mention. That standby time is important for a lot of people, especially if you're like an alpinist or a climber, you're doing like Mount Everest or something like that. That standby time might actually be more important than your GPS on time. Another huge difference between the Enduro 1 and Enduro 2 is going to be the updated user interface. Not only is the user interface a little bit different on the Enduro 2, but it's actually a touch interface. You can actually interact with the watch with your finger by just swiping around, and you don't have to use the buttons. However, if you like using buttons, you can disable the touchscreen and just use the buttons and don't worry about that touchscreen. The Enduro 1, on the other hand, is entirely reliant on the buttons. There is no touchscreen on this watch. You need to use the buttons to get around. Another difference between these two that I'll call something in the user interface is going to be how responsive they are. The Garmin Enduro 2 is incredibly responsive when swiping around the user interface. There's really no lag or difference. Everything's really snappy and fast. The Enduro 1, in some situations, if you really try to scroll fast or you're swiping through things, it can be a little bit delayed at times. It's a really minor difference, but it's something I have noticed. Another huge difference in the Enduro 2 compared to the Enduro 1 is going to be offline mapping and navigation. So in the Enduro 2, you have built-in maps. They're downloaded into the internal storage of the watch, and you can actually navigate around through roads and trails and waterways and all of that right on the watch without needing your phone or an internet connection or anything like that. You can set waypoints, you can create courses in the watch, you can navigate to a destination with turn-by-turn directions. It's really powerful stuff and something I really like about Garmin watches. Unfortunately, the Garmin Enduro 1 does not have built-in mapping. However, it does have breadcrumb mapping. So breadcrumb mapping is basically a blank map with a little squiggly line of where you've been or where you want to go, depending on what you're doing. Breadcrumb mapping is really useful, but it really doesn't compare to the Topo active mapping in the Enduro 2. It's on a whole different level. And on that note, let's dive into the next big difference, and that's going to be internal music storage. Just like I said about the mapping, the Enduro 2 has storage within the watch, so you can actually put music on it and download it to the internal storage of the watch, and then pair your earbuds to the watch and go for a run without your phone. This is a really handy feature if you hate wearing those armbands or trying to find a pocket for your phone. You can just run with your watch and listen to music phone free, which is great. The Garmin Enduro 1, on the other hand, does not have internal storage at all, so you can't put music on it, you can't put maps on it, nothing like that. However, the Enduro 1 still has controls for your phone's music, so you can actually remote control to pause tracks or skip tracks or turn your volume up and down right from the watch without getting your phone, which can be useful if you have your phone in a pocket of your backpack or something like that, but you can't actually put music on the watch itself unless you have an Enduro 2. The next big difference between the Enduro 2 and the Enduro 1 is going to be the difference in lens material on the front of the watch. So the Garmin Enduro 2 comes with power power sapphire glass, which means it's got a solar panel built into the perimeter and throughout the glass, but it's also sapphire crystal lens, which is incredibly durable and scratch resistant. I've really abused sapphire glass in the past and they never scratch unless you do something really gnarly to them. The Enduro 1, on the other hand, uses Garmin's older Power Glass technology, and this relies on Gorilla Glass. Now, the difference between Sapphire and Gorilla Glass, there's a couple of things. So Sapphire, on one hand, is way more durable, but it is much more reflective. So if you see that if I turn my watch at certain angles, it becomes kind of hard to read when the light hits it in certain ways. Gorilla Glass, on the other hand, is not as durable as Sapphire, and by a pretty big margin. I have scratched a lot of Gorilla Glass in my day. However, you can throw a screen protector on there to resolve that a bit. But one big advantage to Gorilla Glass is, if you can see here, when I angle it certain ways, it's a lot easier to read even when it's hitting the light in a certain way. And when I compare these two side by side and tilt them at different angles, you can see it's pretty obvious that the Gorilla Glass is easier to read in most situations. Is it worth giving up the durability of the Sapphire to get the visibility of Gorilla Glass? That's up to you to decide. Personally, for me, I do prefer Sapphire because I like that durability and peace of mind. I also don't like messing with screen protectors because they typically get a little foggy themselves, so you might as well just get Sapphire anyways. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to downplay Gorilla Glass at all. It's a great material, but I have scratched it in the past, so it's a tough call for me. Moving into the next difference between these two watches is going to be something specific for ultra runners out there. Both of these watches do have the ultra run activity profile you can see here, and if I dive into this activity, both of these watches have the ability to start a rest timer when you get to an aid station in a race. So an aid station is typically a place where runners can refuel, fill up their waters, and then move on to the next aid station throughout an ultra marathon activity. The importance behind this rest timer is that at the end of your run, when you save your activity, you can actually see how much time was spent at aid stations versus running, and then optimize your race strategy for the next activity. Both of these watches do have this function. It's kind of similar there. However, the Garmin Enduro 2 has an automatic rest timer. So if you go to an aid station and stop for a certain duration of time, the Enduro 2 will actually start your rest timer to let you know how much time you spent there, and then you don't have to manually click a button to continue on your run like you do on the Enduro 1. Like I said, this is a minor difference. It's just manual entry on the Enduro 1 where you have to click a button for the rest timer, and automatic on the Enduro 2. Does that matter to you? Let me know in the comments down below. The next topic I want to talk about in this video that may not be a key difference, but it is to me, is going to be firmware updates. So the Garmin Enduro 2 was just released a couple of weeks ago, and this watch will continue to get new features and kind of grow over time as Garmin continues to polish and refine the firmware. That means we're going to see new things like training readiness that came out on the Garmin Forerunner 955, the HRV status, and all that other stuff, and potentially even more stuff down the road that we don't know about now. The Garmin Enduro 1, on the other hand, is a little bit older. It came out in 2019 or 2020, I think. I forget. That's besides the point. The point is, this is one generation behind, and that typically means that Garmin is not going to add a whole bunch of new features to this watch. They'll still give it firmware updates, so you'll still continually get updates to fix things that break or add minor updates or features, but it won't be a revolutionary update that'll change everything about the watch. But the difference is that the Enduro 2 will continue to grow and get new features, and the Enduro 1 is probably going to stay the same, but it'll continue to work. Another minor difference between the Enduro 2 and 1 that could be major in your opinion is going to be having options on color. The Enduro 2 only comes in this black DLC coated Sapphire model, which is super cool looking. I really like the green accents and stuff on it, but if you don't like dark watches, you're kind of locked into this one look. Whereas on the Enduro 1, you've got two options. You've got the dark model that looks very similar to the Enduro 2, and then you've got the stainless steel model, which is way cheaper and looks a lot different, and it's got a lighter look to it that you might be into. And I don't know about you, but I really like the look of this Enduro 1 here with the silver bezel. It's got a little green accent on the start-stop button. It's got a gray body, and yeah, it's a good-looking watch overall. Maybe I'm just being petty here, but I feel like there's some people out there that might care about how these things look, so the lighter option on the Enduro 1 might appeal to you. Moving into an arguably more important topic, let's talk about GPS accuracy. The Garmin Enduro 2 has multi-band GNSS, which allows you to use multiple satellite systems at the same time and provides incredible GPS accuracy. It's incredibly accurate in all the GPS modes, not just multi-band mode, even in GPS only mode that gets 150 hours of battery life, it's still very accurate. The Garmin Enduro 1, on the other hand, relies on Garmin's older GPS chipset from the Garmin Fenix 6. I've spent countless hours with this watch and GPS activities compared to other devices, and over time I found that it's like pretty good, but it's really not perfectly accurate, and it does not have multi-band GPS mode, so you don't get to utilize multiple satellite systems at the same time. That's not to say the GPS accuracy on the Enduro 1 is terrible or bad, it's just really not on the same level as the Enduro 2. And now that we've talked GPS accuracy, let's talk about heart rate accuracy, because that's also a pretty big difference. Both the Enduro 2 on the left here and the Enduro 1 on the right here do have optical heart rate sensors on the back of the watch. The Enduro 1 utilizes the Elevate 3.0 heart rate sensor from Garmin that's one generation old. This heart rate sensor was used on a bunch of different models, from the Garmin Fenix 6 to the Forerunner 245 and 945 and a whole bunch of other models, and generally speaking it's a good heart rate sensor, but it's really not perfect. There are situations with this Elevate 3.0 heart rate sensor that results in less than perfect accuracy, especially on a big watch like this, because it tends to wobble around on your wrist when you're running. The more secure you can get the Enduro 1 on your wrist, the more accurate it will get, but it's still not perfect. I've seen some blips here and there. It's still a good heart rate sensor, it's just not dead on. The Enduro 2, on the other hand, has Garmin's updated Elevate 4.0 heart rate sensor, and this sensor is an entirely redesigned heart rate sensor that has way better accuracy. I don't know why it's better, like if the layout of the LEDs is in a better position, or the color or the brightness or something. All I know is in my testing, I get way better results from this sensor than I do on the older Elevate 3.0 sensor. And again, I'm splitting hairs here. The optical heart rate sensor on the Enduro 1 is not terrible at all. It's not a bad sensor. I just find that the Enduro 2 is more accurate in most situations. And now that we've run through all of the major differences between the Enduro 2 and Enduro 1, I want to go back to the start of this video when I talked about the price, because that's really what it boils down to. The Enduro 2 is basically superior in almost every way, except for that standby battery life, than the Enduro 1. But when it comes to the price, the Enduro 1 is less than half the price of the Enduro 2. You're looking at $1,100 here or $500 here. That's a major difference. And when you compare the features side by side, yes, the Enduro 2 does have more, it does offer more, it's got more accuracy and things like that, but is it $600 more? And I just want to remind you, the Enduro 1 is on sale right now for about $550, but like I said, if you use my discount code ENDURO50CTS, which I'll have in the description down below, you can get this for $50 off at $499 from playbetter.com, and that is an incredible deal. On the other hand, $499 will also get you a Garmin Forerunner 955, which is a really great watch and has all the latest technology as well, but it doesn't have the battery life or the build quality of the Enduro 1, and that's just a whole other can of worms I'm not going to open in this video. And now that we've reached the end of this video, I just want to mention that this is just a quick comparison video for some key features that I find important between these two watches. This is not like an in-depth review or anything like that. If you want to see my in-depth review on both of these watches, I'll have them linked up in the corner of the screen here so you can go check them out. But here we're just quickly going through the differences, and I hope it was helpful. If you did find this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you clicked that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel down below. That really helps me out. And now I want to hear from you. Are you going to pick up the Enduro 2 or the Enduro 1? And what was the deciding factor? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you. And that's all I've got for this one today. I probably forgot some major feature between these two, but I'm doing my best here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye.